Welcome back to another episode of the Scale Smart podcast. I'm your host, Jacob. I'm also the founder of NetScale Growth. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Matthew Gertner, the CEO and founder of Salsita Software. Matthew, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Jacob. Great to be here.
So, Matthew, kick me off. Tell me a little bit more about yourself, your experience, and what does Salsita do?
Sure. Okay, so about me personally, I am actually British, believe it or not. I was born in London. When I was a small child, however, my family moved to the US where I developed this accent. And I've always been a bit of a language buff, and I think that was probably the main reason I've been attracted to Europe basically my whole life. And as soon as I graduated from university where I studied computer science and linguistics, I moved to Paris. And with the idea that I'd spend a couple of years working there, get some experience, and then go back to grad school. And of course, I'm still here. That was like 30 plus years ago. And just kind of felt like after 6 months of working that I'd learned more than I had in 4 years of university. So I was like, why would I ever go back? And so yeah, bounced around a bit. I lived in Germany for a while as well. And then in 1990, a friend of mine asked me if I'd be interested in starting a company with him in Prague. So I'd never been to Prague before, but I went and visited. It made a good impression on me. And I was kind of ready for a move, still pretty young and footloose and didn't have a lot to tie me down. So I moved here in 98. I live in Prague still to start my first company. And I've been here ever since. I set up Salsita in 2010. So already we've got a pretty good history behind us, almost 15 years. We started as a web agency doing contract software development for clients. Back then it was reasonably cost effective to do that kind of development in Prague. Like it was reasonable to consider it a low cost destination for software development. And then just to tie up the recent history, a few years ago, I sort of came to the realization that that strategy was not a good long-term strategy anymore. The main reason just being that Prague is getting a lot nicer, a lot more cool stuff, but also a lot more expensive. And it isn't really a low-cost destination anymore. So if your business is based on doing outsourced software development, it's getting hard to compete with the, Romanias and Indias and Chinas, whatever, of the world, where unit labor costs are just way, way lower than here. So for that reason, about 5 years ago, we started developing our own product, which is a framework for building 3D product configurators. The initial use case was, and we can talk about this more, I won't go on with the intro forever, but basically the idea is you go on an eShop, you want to buy some product that's configurable. People probably experience this a lot with furniture, like you're buying a table and you want to say exactly how big it should be, what kind of material to use for the legs and so forth. And a lot of those companies have configurators now, but that's getting more and more common as manufacturing techniques evolve, and there's things like 3D printing and laser cutting and CNC machines. So there's more and more companies who need to be able to offer a made-to-order product selection to their clients on their eShop. And it's like, how do you do that, right? So that's what we do. Basically, we have a very cool framework that makes it quick and easy to develop very high-quality configurators of that type. The client puts it on their website, and then people can go on there and they can see in like stunning 3D exactly what they're buying and configure it to exactly their requirement.
Amazing. And you made a good intro there. And like you mentioned about Salsita evolving from like a small software agency to being now an AI-powered 3D configurator. So what were some of the key challenges you faced during this scaling process, particularly when transitioning from a service-based project to developing your own product?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, okay, so just to talk about the company culture, first of all, I mean, it's kind of accepted wisdom in the software biz that it's very hard for agencies to become product companies. I would wholeheartedly support that conventional wisdom. It's just a different attitude. I had a guy say to me a while back that the job of an agency is to say yes, and the job of a product company is to say no to their clients, right? And that's a pretty difficult mind shift to absorb. And we did have quite a lot of challenges at the beginning where we were just doing too much for our clients, and we'd have budgets, but we'd just be blowing them up because everything they asked for, we'd be like, yes, 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 yes. So just, getting used to the fact that you have a product which has a certain set of functionality, and you, if at all possible, don't want to deviate from that, and you're not getting paid by the hour. So it's not like good if the client wants more and you spend more time on it. No, it's bad because you're getting paid a certain amount. So that was one of the big challenges just from the company culture side. From the technology side, what I think is interesting, you mentioned AI. I didn't actually touch on that during my intro, but yeah, I mean, what we sort of saw with the configurators pretty early on, so this is going back 5 years or so, is that there's a lot of competition in the space, believe it or not, and we needed to be clearly differentiated. That wasn't something we necessarily had figured out going into the process, which in hindsight was not optimal. Like I would definitely say if you're going to develop a product, make sure you know why you're doing it. Make sure you know how you're different from the competition and why you're better and why people should buy your thing and not someone else's, right, before you even start. And we, because we were kind of looking at it as more of a, from that service company angle at the beginning, I don't think we thought that through as much as we should. But what we saw once we started to build configurators and deploy them with clients is that one big challenge was that it's just hard for the average shopper on an e-shop to use that configurator. Not that it's necessarily rocket science, it depends on the product, but just imagine you're catering to every single possible customer of that company. And a lot of them just are, people just don't tend to be that technically savvy. So they can click on a thumbnail and they can see a product page and they can click add to cart. But if you show them this 3D view of a product with all these options and they got to decide what they want, they're not necessarily going to succeed. And if they don't succeed, then you don't sell anything. So we kind of recognized that problem pretty early on. And then when ChatGPT came out, which was sort of 2 years into this process, I immediately recognized, wow, this is it. This is our thing. This is the solution to the problem that we'd really experienced at almost all our clients. So that's how the AI technologies that have been blossoming over the past few years have become relevant for us. In a number of ways. One is that, when you go onto a website and you have to configure something, to have that AI assistant there who knows all the configuration options, who can do stuff for you if you don't know how to do it yourself, who can answer questions when you're not sure. Should I get this option or that option? Why would I get, titanium, whatever, when it's twice as expensive? It can explain that to you. And then also for actually building the configurators, it's something that we're very excited about. And we're working actively on in our product team now is, can we use those same AI technologies to make it much quicker and easier to build the configurator itself to the specific requirements of a given customer, and ultimately to make it possible to do it without any intervention by Salsita at all. So the dream is that, you have a company and you build steel railings, and they're all very custom and every client has different requirements, and you can just go on a website and more or less as a software as a service type offering, upload a few 3D models maybe, and then tell it, here's what I want my configurator to do, and just have it spit that out. So, and that kind of ties into my personal vision about how the software industry is going to evolve. And so I think we're piggybacking on a trend that is very real and very significant, and that's where you want to be when you have a company. You don't want to be fighting against the trends. You want to be kind of riding that wave.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned at the start as well there being a massive influx in the competition and a lot more companies coming on the scene. So how do you guys at Salsita differentiate yourself to make sure that you're always staying ahead of the curve?
Yeah, I mean, the competition in the configurator space is pretty diverse. There's a lot of kind of rinky-dink, I would say crappy, cheap frameworks for building configurators that might be sort of plugins for WooCommerce or something. And that makes sense because if you're a mom and pop shop selling, $80,000 worth of stuff every year, probably not going to want to spend more than a couple $100 a month on a configurator. And if it's not that great, so be it, right? That's just, that's the option. But so we have to kind of fight through that noise, even though those companies aren't really competition. And then on the other extreme, you have all the sort of software agencies who will build these things bespoke without having any of their own intellectual property at all. And that's pretty common with larger companies. So if it's like a Fortune 500 or Global 2000 company wants a configurator, they might not perceive that as a product at all. They're just like, we need this solution for our business, and let's go to our digital agency and let's have them build it. And that might cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially to do it. But if you're a big enough company, then that's not necessarily an issue for you. So we have to compete with that on the high end as well. So yeah, I think to differentiate, it's mainly for us right now about having a high-end offering. So I think we build configurators that are as good as anyone out there. I'm a little biased, I admit, but you can go check out our website and all the references we have there. And I don't think there's companies who are building better quality configurators than us, but try to get the price and the time frame down to where it's highly competitive with the other few companies who are offering configurators of the same kind of quality that we're offering. And that's where I think AI is a massive enabling technology. So as I said, the goal would be maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it would have cost 50, 60, 80,000 bucks to build a certain kind of configurator that's very high quality, has a lot of functionality. Our goal and how we think we're going to stay competitive is to get that down to 30,000 where we probably are now, but then get it down to 10,000, and then ultimately to get that down to zero, where you just go on a website, you pay whatever a month, but you're getting that same super high quality, highly tailored configurator that you were getting in the past for a potentially a six-figure budget.
Mm. And like now you're talking about AI, we'll shift onto the topic of AI, and you guys have integrated AI into your own 3D configurators, which is really really good. How do you see AI transforming the e-commerce and the product customization landscape in the next couple of years?
Well, I kind of hinted at it before. For me, it's more, I mean, I am a software developer by background, and I'm someone who also, I've really spent a lot of time over the past few decades, thinking about software development and what the trends are. I write a lot about software development. At various periods, I've had intense periods of blogging. So that's, it's a topic that's been of great interest to me for really since I was a little kid. And that's where I think that these new AI technologies, more than anywhere else, are going to be truly transformative. I just don't think that the kind of, and as a guy who ran a software agency or has been running software agencies for 20 years or whatever it is, I don't think that kind of model of software development makes that much sense. For most clients, it's just so time consuming, so expensive, so much risk, right, involved. Like how many software projects end up just failing and not providing any benefit after who knows how much investment. So, and yet at the same time, I mean, since the beginning of my career, when I was working in Paris as a software developer back in the early 90s, we were already talking about fourth generation programming languages that would be, much more maybe visual and high level and accessible to lay people. And it hasn't happened, and they're still talking about that stuff. And I think that the biggest issue is just that there's always that gap between what you can do with what they would now call a low code or no code environment and what you can do when you actually have a real software development team actually tailoring the thing to your specific requirements. And so there's always like that 10 or 20% that you can't quite get there. And that leads to this frustration, which means that you can't do the low code or no code approach that costs 10 times as, or 1/10 as much for the majority of projects, because you just won't be able to get all the way to the solution that you want to have, and so you end up having to pay 10 times as much just to get that extra missing 10, 20%. That is where I think that AI is going to make the big difference. I truly believe that already today, and certainly with the next couple of generations of whatever improvements they're going to make to large language models and other modern AI technologies, we'll be able to fill in those gaps so that those low code and no code environments won't take you 80% of the way there. They'll take you whatever, 97% of the way there, and that'll be enough. So I expect that the cost of software development is going to go down radically over the next few years, and that the amount of control that non-developers are going to have over the ultimate result is going to go way up as well. So just to tie that into the e-commerce space, I mean, that's kind of, I think that, like anything else, it's easier to do that when you are focused on a specific niche. So for us, really, our mission is to take that vision that I have for the future of software development, apply it to the area of 3D product configurators where we're active, so that we're able to provide a solution to clients that's far cheaper, deploys far quicker, and gives them far more control using AI technologies before maybe it's possible to build a general purpose solution that would do all that for any area, if that makes sense.
And I think a big thing for AI as well now is like everyone probably like till like 3 months ago was calling AI like a buzzword, and it was always just a buzzword. But I think now AI is like a shift of the future. It's like the shift of reality, and I think a lot of people are starting to realize that now. Is that like the companies that use AI compared to the companies that don't use AI are just going to be miles ahead of the companies which don't, and it will come to a point where they'll just stagnate, and the ones that have actually adapted will just kind of accelerate. So, what do you think about like companies who are on the fence of adopting to AI because they may think, well, I mean, one person said to me about like data security. What are some of the things that you think could stop companies adopting to AI?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think, when you look at the history of technology over the past few decades, there's been a few obvious major technological shifts. The internet is one, right? Smartphones are one. Mobile data ties into that. And the companies that embrace that, whether they were established companies or new startups, have done fantastically well. And the ones who were like, we're actually already pretty happy about the way things are and we don't want to rock the boat, have suffered a lot or even disappeared. Don't think there's any doubt. Certainly in my mind, I've never really been a skeptic about the first time I saw ChatGPT in whatever it was, 2022. I was a convert immediately. I mean, it was immediately obvious to me, wow, this is for real. And so I don't think that is an option for companies to just sit on the fence. And if things like data security are your primary concern, I mean, that's always a trade-off, right? And it's always difficult. But I do think that in a lot of cases, it's a break to innovation that you probably end up paying a far higher cost by not participating in that technological evolution than you would by taking somewhat higher risk in terms of data security. Another problem is there may be entrenched interest in a company where, for example, I mean, I think one good example is I wrote an essay on my newsletter a few months ago about how I started developing software again, because I tend to, running a company, not always have a lot of time to get in the weeds and code myself. But a few months ago, I was kind of missing it. And plus, we didn't have enough developers to work on some of the projects I was interested in doing. So I'm like, I'm just going to jump in and start coding again. But I started doing it with AI. I was blown away by really feeling literally 3 times more productive. I'm not exaggerating, like maybe more. What I could have done in a week, I could do in a day or two suddenly, because the AI is such an accelerator, especially for senior developers. So I wrote an essay about it. Here's my experience using AI. And among other things, to promote it, I went on Reddit and I put it onto the programming subreddit. I'm saying, hey, I just thought this would be interesting to people, like some of my experiences using. And the reaction was unbelievably negative, unbelievably aggressive. I got downvoted to oblivion. And when I started asking, hey, guys, what the hell? The response I got, if I kind of digest it and spit it out in the way that I interpreted it, was basically like, we don't want this to happen. We're developers, and we're scared that our jobs are going to go away. So we're just going to stick our head in the sand, and we're going to act like it's not happening. And of course, you're always, because those technologies are not, perfect now, and there are limitations that you need to work around. And it is a tool and not something that you're just going to say, write this program for me and it'll write it. So, there's always some truth in that skepticism. But I felt like that was exactly the wrong reaction, just to deny reality and hope that it never really happens. And that, I think, is the biggest challenge for companies now, is that if they don't want things to change and they therefore try to convince themselves that these trends aren't real, that it's hype, that it's going to blow over, that there's, too many risks or difficulties with doing it, this new AI-powered way, they're toast. So there's always reasons not to adopt new technologies. But yeah, I think this is a really big one, and it's one that is applicable to every kind of business. So I just don't think it's an option. If you're worried about data security, figure it out, because you need to use these technologies. Otherwise, you're not going to be competitive.
Amazing. And just to conclude, Matt, what are some of the goals you've got for Salsita over the next 12 or so months?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so the biggest probably macro goal would be just to complete this transition to being a fully fledged product company. We are still a bit of a hybrid at this point. Like, we're doing some agency projects. We're doing a lot, of configurators. And I would like to be a pure product company eventually. And I hope that, it'll be realistic to do that in the next 12 months, or let's say 12 to 24 months. On a more fine grained level, what I was talking about, and it's something that I'm personally getting involved with, actually coding as part of the product team, is to get to where we can apply these AI technologies more to the actual creation of the configurators. So what we've been doing is, initially when somebody wanted a configurator, we would take the platform that we'd written, and then there'd be a lot of sort of programming on top of that. So it's still pretty time consuming, and a lot of high skilled people needed to be involved to get from our platform to a configurator that a customer could actually use. And what we've been working on a lot recently is breaking down a lot of that into more kind of configuring the configurator, instead of programming. So if you want to say, okay, I want a configurator that will do this and that and the other thing, instead of having to have a skilled programmer go in and write a lot of code, you just write configuration files that say, here's the models we want to use, and here's the options. And we've gone a long way down that path. We have an amazing product team who I should give a shout out to, doing like really great engineering to make that be more of like knobs that you twiddle and less like freeform code that you're writing. And then the next step is to have the AI write those configuration files, right? So you can go in and you can say, I want a configurator for, and here are my 3D models, and here's how it should work, and it just spits out the configurator for you. And then you're like, oh yes, but if the person chooses this fabric, then it can't be bigger than this, and it understands that, and it like enforces that constraint when people are using the configurator. So on a more kind of low level, from a product perspective, that I think is something that we want to get done in the next 12 months.
Amazing. And if people wanted to reach out, Matt, and find out a little bit more about yourself and the company, where's the best place for them to do that?
Best place to go is, you can always hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm reasonably active there. And in terms of the company, just go to our website, salsita.ai. There's a lot of information there, a lot of case studies, a lot of information, a lot of examples, and also our contact details. I guess you'll have this in the show notes, but Salsita is like a small salsa, right? So it's SALSITA.
Amazing. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your experience and sharing your expertise.
Thanks, Jacob. Really enjoyed it.